Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an absolutely incredible mathematical framework outlined in a deeply fascinating recent monograph. It's called Infinity Omega Mathematics, and it essentially attempts to do the impossible, build the entire architecture of reality starting from absolute nothingness. We're going to look at how purely abstract mathematical operators can theoretically generate existence, relation, observation, and ultimately an infinite, self-sustaining universe. It's a wild, mind-expanding ride, and we're going to use these slides to make every complex step completely clear for you.
So here's our roadmap for today. 1. From void to reality. 2. The core mathematical engine. 3. Scaling up, omega matrices. 4. Topologies of observation. 5. Pushing to infinity. And 6. The infinite game. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. From void to reality. Before we get into the heavy algebra, there's this poetic intuition titled The Song of the Whole Theory that brilliantly frames our journey. Our source material uses this to set the stage. Reality isn't just a static, boring grid. Instead, it's envisioned as a set of recursive, spinning circles observing one another. One circle shows what others see, one circle shows what we truly be. It's just a really beautiful way of saying that existence fundamentally relies on relation and self-reflection.
Okay, so let's see how this actually builds into a formal logical sequence. Our text defines this as the primitive chain. We literally start with the null state, the absolute baseline void with no addressable entities or information. From there, we take a step up to existence, which simply means a non-null state. But existence alone isn't enough. We need distinction, an operator that actually separates states or identities. And once you have distinct, separated states, well, then you can finally form a relation, which is a structured linkage between them.
Notice how continuous state updates down in the engine room construct this whole architecture of emergence. Reality isn't a pre-existing container you just get dropped into. According to this framework, reality is a persistent, relational, verified structure generated by these continuous step-by-step updates from memory to knowledge and finally to understanding.
Section 2. The core mathematical engine.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is this radical function. The authors define a specific parametrized function operating on a base b with a parameter m. Now, through a really brilliant mathematical substitution where b equals x to the power of m, this complex-looking formula beautifully reduces down to a core quadratic equation, r equals m times x squared minus x. It's just amazing how such a chaotic input yields such an elegant gear, perfectly turning abstract inputs into relational, geometric outputs.
And look at the graphs generated from these equations. You can notice the radical function plotted out, cleanly reducing right into that predictable parabolic curve you see highlighted. Plus, the math reveals a constant finite difference of 2m for this curve. This shows us exactly how the pure algebra natively dictates these precise geometric curves. The algebraic engine is literally drawing the geometry of the entire system.
Section 3. Scaling up omega matrices.
Now, our source text introduces a concept called the generalized omega state vector. Specifically, they map out a canonical 8-component basis. Think of this vector as our fundamental primitive data structure. It contains mathematical states like x squared, 2x, x to the power of 1 over x, and so on. But the real magic happens when the variable x equals exactly 1. When x is 1, this entire 8-component structure just locks into a perfectly stable identity state. Why? Well, because 1 squared is 1, 1 to the power of 1 is 1. You get the idea. The math perfectly aligns, creating a stable, persisting mathematical identity. This is basically the mathematical equivalent of an atom finally forming in our empty void.
And by taking these stable vectors and stacking them together, we build a generalized omega matrix. Just notice how those one-dimensional rows stack up into a vast three-dimensional field topology. We're taking that simple mathematical engine and expanding it into a structure capable of handling addition, multiplication, and identity laws across multiple dimensions. We are literally building the fabric of a mathematical space.
Section 4. Topologies of observation.
Okay, this part is absolutely wild to me. We're juxtaposing the raw algorithmic data array on the left with the theoretical schematic blueprint on the right, just to understand how the system models perception. The authors call this structure the I matrix. On the left side, the pixelated output looks pretty chaotic, right? But on the right, you can see the highly ordered topological structure it actually represents: a pupil, an iris, and an exterior field. It is staggering that raw matrix mathematics organically builds what functions mathematically as an eye.
Let's look a bit closer at how the text defines this. The I matrix literally partitions reality into distinct zones. First, you have the core, denoted as V, which represents observed reality. These are matrix values that equal a specific known constant. Then you have the boundary, denoted as partial V, which is the interactive edge. This boundary links that clearly observed core to the completely unknown exterior field. So observation, strictly mathematically speaking, is just the interaction occurring right at this boundary.
Moving right along to Section 5, Pushing to Infinity.
The text also performs an asymptotic analysis on our core radical function. Notice what happens in this table when we run the system to its absolute limits. When we push the parameter m towards infinity, our complex chaotic algebraic engine remarkably collapses into a beautifully clean, elegant expression heavily featuring the natural logarithm. The authors distill this into what they call the climax equation, or the reverse logarithm identity. It isolates the natural logarithm of b entirely based on the limit of our radical function as m goes to infinity.
You can actually watch this convergence happening in real time. Follow the chaotic blue line. That is the raw algebra at lower values of m, kind of jumping all over the place. But as m pushes toward infinity on the x-axis, all that chaos flattens out perfectly, converging directly along the smooth, glowing natural logarithm curve. Infinite algebraic recursion fundamentally collapses into natural, predictable logarithms.
And here's where it all connects. Because natural logarithms are so deeply tied to the distribution of prime numbers, the authors propose a direct mapping. By bridging the reverse logarithm engine with Chebyshev's function and the Euler product, this connects it directly to the absolute deepest mysteries of number theory. The very engine building reality is tied to the DNA of prime numbers themselves. It's just mind-blowing.
Finally, Section 6, The Infinite Game.
This blueprint right here brings it all together. It shows the true recursive nature of this entire framework. Just look at the flow. It starts at the engine, processes through the observation of the I matrix, generates observed reality, and then reaches the origin. But it doesn't stop. The highest order of generated physics, the absolute end of the chain, feeds right back into the most primitive null boundary at the top to start the renewal process all over again. It is a perfect self-observing, self-generating loop.
The text leaves us with this final equation for the infinite game. The end of one cycle is simply the beginning of the next. Transformation equals closure plus creation. Ultimately, the system demands that there is no final stopping point. It proves that infinity isn't just some destination you can reach. Rather, it is a continuous recursive generation over any terminal victory. It's continuous play.
We've traced the architecture from a total void, through quadratic engines, right into an infinite self-observing matrix. As you digest this architecture of emergence laid out in these slides, I want to leave you pondering a final thought. If reality truly is simply the continuous persistence of verified relations, constantly generated and updated by this underlying math, where do you fit into the matrix? What exactly is observing you right now? Keep asking questions, and thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.